Welcome into the Action Network podcast. We are presented by our friends at BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. My name is Brendan Glasheen, your host. This week, NFL Week 10 Best Bets. We are back. Each and every week, we have Brandon Anderson of Action Network, Luke Swain, a.k.a. Vegas Refund of Action Network, and we've got Grant Neefer joining us this week for our Best Bets episode. As a reminder, we have Best Bets episodes in other sports as well, out with the NBA podcast Buckets. We've also got the Line Change podcast that you can tune into. We have those available wherever you get your podcasts throughout the course of those seasons. I know it's a very sporty time of year. Also, you can find this podcast included, the other two I just mentioned. We are live also, once we're done our record, we're live on the Action Network YouTube page. So if you do like watching us, you can like the video and also please subscribe to the Action Network YouTube page. And when you listen to the podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and a review. You can leave those reviews in Apple Podcasts, especially Spotify, wherever you listen. We greatly appreciate it. You can find these guys individually in the free award-winning Action Network app. We are above 500 on Best Bets 3 consecutive weeks. Week 7, 5-4. Week 8, 6-3, and last week, week 9, a 5-4 mark. Shout out Jill Gallant, the touchdown better. He had Devontae Smith plus 200. So again, it's not always about the record, right, Brandon? It's not always about the record. It's about those odds as well. And if you're getting that good CLV and also just putting in those picks, and Brandon knows that as a futures better. So without further ado, let's dive into week 10 best bets. Brandon, I turn to you first as always. What are we eyeing for our first one?
Brandon, we're going back to the island, but not this year's island, last year's island. Let's go Seattle Island. Seahawks -6 against the Commanders. Look, Seattle was not good last week, but I want to overreact. Baltimore's a bad matchup. Baltimore's really good, but now they're going to stay in the DMV. Oh, they're home, but they're facing another team from there, Washington, who I'm looking to fade. Washington is 4-5, but they don't look the part of a 4-5 team. They're dead last defensively by DVOA the last 4 weeks. They traded away the pass rush, right? Montez Sweat is gone. Chase Young is gone. Seattle traded for pass rush. They've got Leonard Williams now. So I think this sets up for a really good trenches game for Seattle. We know we love to focus on that. Geno Smith, when he's not under pressure, has been really good this season. And I think that he can stay mostly clean. And then you get Washington corners that are very beatable against DK Metcalf, I think, should have a big game. Obviously, Lockett, Smith, and Jigba. Shane Waldron, the offensive coordinator for Seattle, they've been really good. Like, Seattle's offense has a lot of very strong underlying numbers. They continue to not be good on third down, not be good in the red zone. Those numbers typically tend to regress. And I keep waiting for the spot. When is it going to regress positively for Seattle and get the big game, the big offensive score? And I think it could be this game. I think it's a good setup for them. Good home field advantage for Seattle. Washington, worse on the road, worse early in the first half. So this could get away early. Couple trends, of course. Pete Carroll after a loss. Boy, did they lose last week. 47, 29, and 4 against the spread, 62%. And then here's one that I've heard Raybon mention as well on the 6-pack. Teams that have a 60% win percentage or better after a blowout 20 or more point loss. That's definitely Seattle here. 68% hit rate. And if you just look at week 10 to 15, so the teams that we know are good, we know Seattle is good. Seattle is good. Don't let Baltimore confuse you. Just week 10 to 15, 60% win percentage or better after 20-point loss, 39-6 ATS, 87% covering by almost 10 points a game. I think this is the spot where Seattle puts it together. I'll go Seahawks -6.
So correct me if I'm wrong, this feels very similar to when the Ravens blasted the Lions, and then the Lions come back and they redeem themselves and play well against the Raiders. That feels kind of a similar, that fits the trends, right?
Very similar. I think I even made that pick on this podcast and even played Detroit Escalators saying, hey, we've been waiting for Detroit to have it all put together. And then if I remember right, they came out and put up like 500 plus yards of offense to 150, but had like 700 field goals and stupid penalties and whatever, and ended up winning by like 12 and hitting none of the escalators. But they dominated that game. Josh McDaniels got fired 2 days later. Honestly, it wouldn't totally shock me if we got something like this. I think Ron Rivera is kind of just a dead man walking at this point with this team. So I like Seattle to get a big win here.
Okay, very good. And just for fun, let's take a look. Total yards for the Lions in that game, 486. But again, it's a different team, the Raiders. And I don't think Ron Rivera is quite in a spot where he's going to get fired after a loss this
Yeah,
week
probably
because
not.
they're hovering around 500. But very similar, very good. And you were on the Lions last week. Luke, I feel like you're going to echo this one. You and Brandon always seem in alignment on your picks.
I'm going to go the Seahawks as well for a lot of reasons that Brandon just stated, but it is just backing a Seahawks team that we know is good, like Brandon said, coming off probably one of the bigger beatdowns that we've seen in a while. Washington, they beat the Patriots, but that's not saying a lot. And this is going to be a back-to-back road trip for them, and teams going to Seattle off of a double as a second leg of a back-to-back road trip from east to west are 15 and 23 against the spread, so that's 39%. So like this is going to be a tough travel spot for Washington, which even without it, like I like the Seahawks, but that just adds to the enticement that this -6 is currently. That I think we're getting a good price based off of that beatdown where the Seahawks just played probably two of the best defenses in the league between the Ravens and the Browns. And Geno has drastic splits when he goes from man and zone. Like he really struggles when he goes against man, and when he goes against zone, he's kind of a different beast. Where he's 8th in EPA in the league against zone this year, and he's 21st against man. And Washington plays at a top 10 zone rate. So this is definitely sets up well for Geno, who really has looked tough or bad the last 2 weeks. But again, it's the Browns and the Ravens. Those are just tough teams to go against. Are going to make a lot of the quarterbacks in the league look bad. And Washington just I think they got lucky against the Patriots. Like they still won. Like I was on the Patriots. I think they probably should have covered that game.
You bet the Patriots again? What have we talked about this on this very show?
It's just an incredible thing at this point. I just need to win one of them. But yeah, Seahawks for all the reasons Brandon said, and it's just a great spot and a tough spot for Washington. So Seahawks -6, -6.5, either or.
Okay, very good. Grant, you've come on before and given us player props, and that is the direction you're heading in. It's actually a team we've talked about already. This player you're betting on is going up against the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I think the Bucs are overreacting a little bit to the matchup, but I'm going with Watson over anywhere from 188 to 192, depending on where you're getting at 0.5 passing yards. To me, this line seems a little bit low. I mean, I get that the Ravens' pass defense is fantastic. I mean, this is the two best pass defenses in the league by a fairly wide margin, but getting this under 200 is pretty solid in this spot here. I mean, the Ravens are only giving up 170 passing yards per game, but they've had a fairly easy schedule for the most part, and they're not quite as good as the numbers show. Watson, he's been solid over the last few games where he's actually played a full game or played at all. Over 200 passing yards in each of those, right around 240 per game. He has solid receivers. I mean, Cooper's always a go-to guy. They're going to be airing it out. It's a 6.5-point spread, so Baltimore's favored. Likely going to be throwing the ball late in the game, Cleveland is. So to me, this line seems a little bit low. It should probably be up at around 205 in this spot. I mean, Lamar Jackson on the other side, less of a passer, worse matchup, and they're the favorites, and yet his line's sitting at 202.5. So there's just a discrepancy. And I mean, the view on Watson that he's always going to just go out of a game injured, which I mean, it has been the case a lot. But he's still passing the ball 30 plus times in pretty much every single game he's playing. 188.5, even versus a top tier pass defense, is too low of a line.
Yeah, and to your point about the books adjusting, I know his rushing prop is at 16.5, but I feel like there's still this public perception that Deshaun Watson is what he was when he was in Houston, in the sense that he's not gaining and churning out yards with his legs. He's been throwing the ball more often than we think, and a trailing game script makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's go to our second round of picks. Brandon, what do you got?
Well, you were just on a defensive, ugly-looking game with Browns-Ravens. I'm going to go to another one that we had a chance to not have to watch on Sunday night, but we have flex scheduling now. We stuck with it. We're going with Jets-Raiders. I'm going to take the under 37. What are we doing with the flex schedule thing? They had Jets-Raiders. We decided we're going to keep it. We got Broncos-Vikings next week. I'm a Vikings fan. I don't want to watch that game, and they could have flexed out of Sunday night. they're keeping it there. Like, what's even the point of flex scheduling? If I gotta watch this game, I gotta make money off of it. So give me the under. I took this Sunday morning under 37 as kind of a bonus look ahead if you were on the app. It dropped a little bit, and every point, every half point matters, but it's risen back. We got a couple of Raiders corner injuries, I think, that maybe have moved it back to 37. That's a key number still. I'm going to grab the 37 here. So I think if you look at Jets Raiders, the case sort of makes itself, right? Both offenses stink. They're 29th and 30th in DVOA. They're both bottom 5 passing. They're both bottom 7 running. Even with all the bad quarterbacks around the league, I just did like a midseason refresh at quarterback. I still rank Zach Wilson and Aiden O'Connell bottom 4 among quarterbacks in the league.
Wow.
So we have bad offenses that don't run, don't pass, have bad quarterbacks. And I think both defenses are good. Jets, we know the Jets are good. Obviously, they've been great even against really good quarterbacks. Since week 4, Jets are number 3 DVOA defensively. Raiders are 12th during that span. Patrick Graham, their coordinator, has been doing really well. They've been better at home. They've got a few young guys on the line at linebacker, starting to step up a little bit. I think they're a great defense. You don't have to be a great defense. If you're facing Zach Wilson, right, it makes it pretty easy for you. So I think this is a good spot for an under. It's just kind of one of those ugly games. Raiders offense scored 30 last week, and they all lit up the cigars to celebrate against the Giants and Tommy DeVito. Look, you can light the cigars to celebrate Josh McDaniels leaving. I'm fine with that. But they averaged under 16 points a game before that. Their defense is only allowing 18 points a game the last 5 games. So just not a lot of points here. Raiders 7-2 to the under this season. Only one game at 42, one game above 42. Jets games, outside of one kind of higher scoring game against Denver, Jets games are averaging 33.7 points a game. So like, we know to bet Jets unders, Zach Wilson unders. And then the reason I was on this Sunday morning before I looked at it too closely, I'm just going to hit you with a slew of under trends here. This is like the most under trends I've ever seen in one game in Bet Labs in our system. Home underdog unders. We've talked about that one. 62% the last 2 years. Primetime unders. You know that one by now. 62% the last 4 years. 76% this year. Night unders that are not Monday night when it's 37-40 at the total. 68% hit rate. And that's not the last 2 or 4 years. That's the entire system that we're tracking data. Games at 37 or below just the last 4 years. 22-6-1 to the under, 79%. And this year alone, totals at 38 or below, 9-2-1 to the under. So just everything is pointing toward the under here. It's not fun betting under 37 because like literally anything good they do, you're like, oh no, oh shoot, there goes another point for me. It's fine. If you're going to watch the game, you may as well bet for it to be awful. And Zach Wilson, Aiden O'Connell is going to be awful.
I don't think you mentioned Antonio Pierce too. I mean, I just think that speaks to your point about the belief defensively too. I know it's like a narrative thing, but it feels Pierce being a former defensive guy, a champion. I mean, he's got them believing. They're trying. Yeah. I think the Raiders are now trying.
They're fired up. They're at home in Vegas. The other thing I noticed too is Josh Jacobs had his most rushing attempts of the season last week. And like Antonio Pierce extremely strikes me as a dude that's going to be like, we defend and we run the football. So it's like, all right, great. Run the football, chew up the clock. Let's just keep grinding the clock and get this. Don't let Zach Wilson back on the field. Just run another play up the middle. Just run the clock out and keep this low.
Real quick, because I would imagine, as you said, folks are picking up on the prime time trends of betting unders in the Sunday night game. What would you bet it to? Like, because I'm seeing 36.5 out there. Like, at what point do you say, okay, I would stay away from betting a total under?
Within reason, when I write my article with the every game, every team pick later in the week, and I do a lot of these under, like we're recording Thursday, the Thursday night game is a classic ugly under. The way I always say it in my column is bet 37 or the best number you can find. Like effectively, when the total gets this low, the research that I've done shows that they literally can't make it low enough. So like they're not going to drop it to 25 or something ridiculous. They're just going to keep sliding it down. And effectively, once the total is so low, there's not a number they can set it to account for how bad the offenses look or how dominant the defenses are. So I would just go ahead and take the under and just get the best number you can.
Okay, very good. All right, Luke, what's your second one?
I'm going to go with the Titans, who are right now plus 1.5 at the Bucks.
Bucks.
Yeah, so Titans plus 1.5 at the Bucks, which this one, it's a simple breakdown, but I mean, Levis, I was fading against the Falcons 2 weeks ago, thinking that fading the unknown, which we are somewhat realizing the unknown that he might actually be very good. The game against the Steelers, which was on a short week, was just an awful draw for a rookie quarterback going to Pittsburgh, and the Steelers ended up covering. It was an extremely lucky cover, to be honest. But the Titans were covering the entire week, and Levis, honestly, he looked good. The box score, like the stats, aren't. If you just look at them and you didn't see him play, you probably think he had an awful game. But Levis, like from the eye test, looked like he has it. And the one thing that you can notice is that Levis was struggling against man, but when he had his glimpses, it was against zone when Pittsburgh was in zone. And luckily, the Bucks play zone at probably the highest rate in the entire league. At least 80% of the time, the Bucks are in zone. So the matchup for zone with Levis, who's a rookie, pans out much better than the Steelers last week. So Titans at plus 1.5. I'm a believer in Levis. The matchup's good on defense. And the Bucks just aren't going to be they can't run the ball in general. And they're definitely not going to be able to run the ball against this Titans team. And Baker put up 30 plus against the Texans. And I just don't see that happening against this Titans defense, where the secondary has had problems. But at the same time, they're not going to be able to run the ball at all. And I'm fine with Baker having to beat me, because history tells us that that's probably not, it's going to happen a lot less than likely. So in the last cherry, which if I just cut out everything that I just said before and you just bet on this one angle, you'd probably be fine. But I've said on this podcast 100 times how much I love Vrabel. And we have Vrabel versus Todd Bowles, who Todd Bowles is just a pure fade. And we're getting Mike Vrabel at a small number. And this number is going from a pick'em to +1. I think they were favored at one time. So as long as it really doesn't get higher, then I would still take it at any of those three. But Mike Vrabel versus Todd Bowles, done. Easy. Titans plus 1.5.
Okay. And as it relates to Will Levis, Grant has an angle on the quarterback of the Titans.
Yeah, strangely enough, I like the Titans to win this game. I'm right there with Luke on pretty much everything except for Will Levis is going to be good. He's not good yet. I mean, he's still kind of just scrambling, kind of buffering whenever he's throwing a lot of times, and he's gotten lucky a lot of times. I mean, we look at the first week, 2 of the DeAndre Hopkins passing touchdowns. One, he had 10 yards of separation. The other one probably should have been PI, and then defender just stopped. Even last week, he's getting lucky with some of these big throws. He kind of reminds me right now of Josh Allen, his first year in the league. Kind of slings it, kind of really raw. I believe Levis is going to be really good, and I believe he's not that bad right now. But I also know the Titans probably going to try and run the ball a decent amount. Last week, short week, going up against Pittsburgh, it was kind of a weird spot. He came out just absolutely chucking the ball, then stopped, and then had to throw a ton later on in the game where he didn't look quite as good late in the game. I don't think he's quite there yet, is basically what it is. And 220, while it seems like a low line, it might even go higher than that, realistically. I'm taking it now. I'll probably end up taking it again for more money closer to game time, because everyone kind of saw the first 2 weeks and believes Levis is good. But realistically, he has ways to go before he actually becomes good. And the Titans are still going to try and run the ball on the ground. I mean, we look at Derrick Henry's numbers. Every single week, blowout, or they're trailing most of the game, he's going to get 14, maybe 15 rush attempts. It's a close game or they're leading, he's going to get 30 in those spots, and they're just going to try and hammer the ball on the ground. So anytime it's a close game, the Titans tend to run the ball a lot, going to keep the ball a little bit out of Levis' hands. I don't know if Vrabel actually likes Levis or not, but the number just seems a little bit high. Not a great matchup going up against Tampa Bay. I know they've been a little bit worse defensively than we thought they would this year, but still not a great matchup. I think that they're going to run a little bit more conservative offense. We saw Levis throw the ball 39 times last week, but again, most of that was in the second half when they had to try and come back. And miss pass, big play, miss pass. So kind of adds up. I don't expect the same volume. I expect something similar to what we saw in Atlanta, where he ended up with 238 yards, but that was with several big plays, including a 61-yard touchdown.
Okay. Yeah, and he was like, I think what Levis, if I remember correctly, in that Thursday night game, he was around 189, like hovering around 190, and then all of those yards he accumulated against the Steelers were in that final drive.
What was the? I don't think you said the actual bet.
It's Levis under 220.5 passing yards.
Cool.
Passing yards under. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably good to mention.
Real quick, any concern? And again, you might be right, Grant, just on the game script, but Derrick Henry's snap count was down compared to Spears. Any concern about that as far as the Titans running the ball?
No. So, I mean, we kind of see this throughout the course of the season. Snap count between Spears and Henry has been pretty similar almost every single game. Like, favors Spears when they're trailing, favors Henry a little bit when they're ahead, but it's the volume. Like when Henry's actually on the field, his snap count really doesn't matter as much as the volume. Okay. And the volume has been fantastic. They've run him a ton when he's on the field. So even in games where Spears and Henry have similar snap counts, the touches for Henry are like 2x what they are for Spears, like maybe even more than that. So when Henry's on the field, they're generally running the ball a lot, and it'll favor more if it's a close game to have Henry on the field more. It's just snap counts, while it's something we look into a lot, this is a weird scenario where they just want to give the ball to Henry. That's it. When he's in the game, just give it to him, grind out 2, 3, 4, 5 yards each time, and then hope for a big run.
Okay, good stuff. I had to, clear my eyes here for a sec. We go to the last round of picks, and I'm seeing an anytime touchdown bet, and Joe Gallant's not here, and he's just to be clear, he's not here. So, Brandon, you have an anytime touchdown pick this week.
I do. I think it's my first anytime touchdown pick that I've done ever on this podcast. So in Jill's honor, give me Austin Ekeler to score an anytime touchdown against the Lions, and even plus 100 odds. And that's what caught my eye. I in my article at the end of each week, I have to make a pick for every single team. So sometimes I have to go digging a little bit, and I had to go digging because I like the Lions, right? That was our look ahead last week. We debated at the end of the show, are we sure this is the right number? It was plus 1.5. It's now Lions -3. I looked at taking them again because I still like the Lions even there, but I had to dig a little bit sometimes to say, okay, well, where's the value on the Chargers? I think there's real value on Austin Ekeler. So this is the highest total on the board this weekend, 48.5. So with all the low scoring ugly games, this is the one that we think should have a lot of points. Ekeler is totally back. He's getting his usual snap counts, usual carries per game. He was my preseason rushing touchdowns leader pick. Obviously not going to happen now with the injury time that he missed, but Kellen Moore likes to run the football into the end zone. Like that's how his offenses have gone over the years. I think of all the Cowboys rushing touchdowns that we've had. So we've seen, I believe, 8 rushing touchdowns, just only 3 from Ekeler because he's been missing all the time. But he's also getting his reception targets back. Detroit is top 5 against wide receiver 1. The Chargers only have a wide receiver 1. It's just Keenan Allen, and everyone else is hurt right now. So I think that's another spot where anytime touchdown versus a rushing touchdown, I think Ekeler is always going to be a threat to catch one. Touchdowns this year, Ekeler's played 5 games. He scored at least 1 touchdown in 3 of them. So that's already better than 50-50, which is the odds we're seeing here. Go back to last year, he scored a touchdown in 14 out of the last 19 games that he played. It's a 74% hit rate. That would be more like -300, and we're getting a plus 100 here. So I asked Joe, I know he keeps track of all the odds here. He said that Ekeler has been at least -120, as high as -200 every game this season and last season as well. The last time he's had a plus in front of his number was week 1, 2021. So wow. Plus 100, I think he's just way underpriced since he's kind of been away and we forget how much of a touchdown machine he is. I honestly would put him as the most likely touchdown scorer this weekend. And yes, Christian McCaffrey is playing this weekend. So that's how confident I would be. At the same book where he's plus 100, he is plus 600 to get in the end zone twice. He's done that in 6 of those last 19 games. That's 32% versus implied 14%. So I love my escalators. I think this is one to sprinkle a little bit on the double touchdown there as well. We're getting a lot of points in this one. I still like the Lions, but give me Austin Ekeler anytime touchdown plus 100.
All right, very good. Yeah, he found the end zone twice against the Jets on Monday night this past week. All right, Luke, final pick for Week 10.
So I'm going to go with the Saints laying 2.5. There are 3s out there at the Vikings, which, I mean, I was on the Vikings last week, and seeing what Dobbs did was just incredible. But that was a very emotional game. And I just think that the market's overvaluing Dobbs at this point, where like when he was at the first couple of games when he was with the Cardinals, like he looked great. And then everything fell off a cliff to like who he actually was. And he was a bottom 2 or 3 quarterback in EPA in the entire league. And when a backup comes into the game, like halfway through or whatever it was, like usually you tend to see teams kind of caught off guard because this isn't the guy that they prepared for. And that is probably somewhat of what we saw with Dobbs against the Falcons last week, which really, like, his passing numbers were tough. I know he didn't know any of the plays, and like the success came from his legs, which he is way faster than I ever thought he was. But this is just a spot where I hate laying it, especially on the road with the Saints, but they have looked a lot better, and the Saints are completely healthy and the Vikings are not. You got Darisaw probably going to miss, Osborne probably going to miss, Hawkinson, we're not sure. So if you're telling me that Lattimore, who's probably one of the corners that does the most shadowing in the entire league, is on Addison, like who else is going to be making a play? Like, not that Cam Akers is like a threat, but he just tore his Achilles again. So like I just don't know who Josh Dobbs will throw to or who will make a play on this Vikings defense if those 3 guys are out. And the Saints have put up 80 points in the last 10 quarters. So an offense that was struggling. I love Taysom Hill, and I think he really is the difference. And I mean, that dude is just an absolute like monster. Like in the red zone, like just take Carr out and put Taysom in it, like Hill in, like that. He's going to get hurt with just how he runs. But 80 points in the last 10 quarters for an offense that was struggling is definitely starting to catch his breath, I guess you could say. And Carr, like you do not like the Saints team and Carr when they have to win by margin, like that is an auto fade. Like that is one of the principles. Like, and we saw it last week, like, which is exactly why you played the Bears. The Saints could have covered that game 100 times, but they just still didn't. So like when Tomlin as a home dog, Saints as a big favorite, like those are like 2 of the principles. Like it's just automatic. But Carr as a small favorite is actually 12-8 against the spread. Which is a very small sample size, but he's had success relative to, I think he's like at 30% as a big favorite. So I'm more comfortable at 2.5, 3, whatever it is, fading Dobbs. And this Vikings defense, like if you look at the receivers that they played in the last 5 weeks, you got Carolina, Chiefs, Chicago, the Niners, and Green Bay. And out of those teams, like elite receivers that they've played, I would say DJ Moore,
Brandon Ayuk,
like, and that's it. And outside of those, like they really haven't been tested. So against this Saints defense, who's elite, I would say, this Vikings defense has looked better, but it does feel like somewhat of a, I don't want to say asterisk, but like who's really tested them. So I'll take Saints laying 2.5 right now. I definitely look for the 2.5s. 3, totally fine. Definitely wouldn't go higher than 3. I don't think it's going to get there. So Saints as a small fav.
So do we know yet on Justin Jefferson if he's going to play?
I'm assuming he's not. Like
okay.
I know
you didn't mention his name, right?
Yeah, like I didn't even like. I know they opened the practice window and he practiced yesterday in a limited capacity, but I would be shocked if he plays. Which if he does play, how healthy he is, but that would definitely, like if he does play, it'd still be on the Saints. But we definitely would. I would assume it would come down to like 1.5, which would be great.
Okay. All right, very good. Hawkinson, limited participant Wednesday, and like you said, unlikely we see KJ Osborne with the concussion protocol. And for the record, on the subject of anytime touchdowns, Taysom Hill, 2-1 this week. 3rd in that game as far as odds are concerned. All right, Grant, take us out. Grant, good job. I just read the pick. Good job, Grant. What's the last one? Give it to us.
The last one is the Colts minus 1.5. And
good job.
This is pretty simple. I mean, people are a little bit higher on the Patriots, after they beat Buffalo. What was that, 2 weeks ago? But or 3 weeks ago. There is a big difference between Belichick in divisional games and Belichick in non-divisional games. This year, 0-5 against the spread, 0-5 overall in non-divisional games. Been outscored by like 100 points almost this season by non-divisional opponents. He's been absolutely terrible in non-division games. Since Mac Jones came around, he hasn't really been great as a home dog either. 2-6 against the spread. They are just not the same team. And the Colts on the other side, they're a lot better team than people give them credit for. I know that Richardson not being in the lineup doesn't help, but Minshew has been a serviceable quarterback, and their run game is really solid. They tend to plan their game script around their opponent, so sometimes Minshew will throw the ball 40 times, sometimes they'll run the ball 40 times. Probably going to be more of a passing game here. But still, like, Patriots have close to 100-point differential this season and have been blown out massively in almost every non-divisional game so far this season. They got beat by 34 against the Saints, 35 against Dallas. Probably could have been worse than that one. They did keep it close with the Eagles and the Commanders, but Commanders really not a great team, and neither is Vegas. Like, they haven't played these great opponents. I mean, the Saints aren't a great team. They're good enough, but the only real good non-divisional opponent they've played is the Cowboys, which they got crushed by. They're losing to bad teams in non-divisional games. Like, the Colts are the better team in pretty much every single facet, and even playing on the road, 1.5 points, this spread I think is probably, I wouldn't be surprised if it moves to 3 in this spot. I'm getting it early. I think it's going to keep moving, and also we need to mention that Bill Belichick, I think, is fully checked out as he walks out of someone's house this morning. I think he's just,
I saw that.
He's 71, doesn't have Brady anymore.
Hey, he's going to Germany. Whoever he was, it's a big trip coming up. You know,
there's a clip that released of him.
I saw.
But the Pats are so bad. Like,
Luke, did you listen carefully there? No Patriots this week, right?
No, and honestly, like, and speaking as a victim of the Patriots this year, like, this team is like totally reminding me of like the Browns a couple of years ago, where like they were the quote unquote sharp side every week because there was just like value, and the Browns just continued to lose and not cover. And like, I was probably a victim of that a couple of years ago. And if this gets to 3, those will get gobbled up right away and it'll come back down. But like, it's just, God, they're so bad.
They're not good.
I'm wearing my Patriots hoodie right now, and Jesus.
Yeah, you didn't cut the sleeves up to honor Bill. Good job. All right,
very good. They just need to get a new GM. That's what they need to do. Like, he can be coach, whatever. Just no more GMing.
Luke,
especially if he drafts. Like, he cannot draft Marvin Harrison. If he drafts Marvin Harrison Jr., like, hooray. But like, that is the only way he's not going to be good, is if the Patriots draft Marvin Harrison, because every receiver they draft sucks.
Stay tuned for spring 2024 when Luke Swain joins us for the NFL draft episodes of the Action Network podcast, where the Patriots will be selecting high, and they'll probably trade down and get like 3 second-round picks. Anywho, let's go to the look ahead for Brandon Anderson. So as Brandon mentioned earlier, he got the Detroit Lions as an underdog at +1.5 last week as his look ahead. So we'll monitor how that goes. The look aheads have been good to us here on the podcast. Look aheads this week, when you include the look aheads, we're at 500 for the season overall on the Best Bets pod. But this week, Brandon, you're going to a team you've backed before in a rah-rah spot. Not a blah-blah, but a rah-rah.
That's right. Yeah, guys, I almost went with the grossest look-ahead pick of the year. I'll give you a little half bonus look-ahead here. Giants +8. Tommy DeVito in Washington. Washington's an 8-point favorite against an actual NFL football team, which I think the Giants still are. That line has moved 9.5 points since the preseason number. You can't tell me Tommy DeVito is 9.5 points worse than what this team was. So I almost did that one. Those games are usually close. But then I got to the Pittsburgh game, and I got to have my rah-rah. Steelers +4.5 at the Browns. I think the Steelers win this weekend at home against the Packers, who are not very good. I had the Steelers as my hot read team. I looked at them again for this podcast. We talked about the Browns game earlier. They just don't have a lot of offense right now. They're in Baltimore. They're big underdogs. That could get ugly. So that's a reason to grab this now. Last 5 weeks, the Browns are dead last offensively in DVOA. They're dead last in success rate, 36% success rate for their offense. And Steelers, actually, the metrics really like the Steelers. I watch the same Steelers you guys do. I don't think it looks great. I don't like Matt Canada. And then every week I look and I'm looking at futures like, all right, now can I take the Steelers win total under? And every week it's like, oh, actually the value is still on the over. There's still some value in the division. Like, what the heck? I don't understand. I think part of the reason is Pittsburgh has played the number one strength of schedule so far. So the numbers, DVOA and some of those metrics are going to factor that in. And the numbers are a bit deflated and they don't look that good. But Pittsburgh's defense, I think, is closer to Cleveland's defense than the Browns' offense is to the Steelers. And that's the big difference to me here. And then all the trends. Get to the rah-rah in a second. But Kevin Stefanski, Browns coach, bad division, bad as a favorite. 29% cover rate in the division, 38% cover rate as a favorite, 2-8 ATS as a division favorite. And then old rah-rah Mike Tomlin, week 5 forward as an underdog, 71%. It's better in the division, 74% as a division underdog. He in those games is 17-9 straight up as a division underdog, 58% ROI. This is another game with a low total. So it's 4.5 points, a lot of points. I'll take the Steelers on the road. Browns and Steelers have played 49 times this century. Cleveland has won 9 times. They are 4.5 point favorites with Deshaun Watson and no offense. No, thank you. Steelers 4.5, and I'll take the money line 2 plus 180. Rah rah, Mike Tomlin.
The AFC North is just like auto. Like we talked about earlier this year. Like, the underdogs in the AFC North is just
yeah. DeBundo, take your blah blah and shove it for next week.
I think he was right on that blah blah. I like the blah blah idea, but this is a rah rah spot.
It really was good, the blah blah thing. I really enjoyed that. Okay, that'll do it here on the Action Network podcast for our NFL Week 10 Best Bets episode. Again, we're presented by our friends at BetMGM. If you missed the full betting preview with Stuckey and Raybon, the Sunday six-pack, that episode is available now. And be sure to tune in Monday morning for our weekly recap episodes. We've got Jill Gallant and Evan Abrams. Brandon stops by with his hot read as well. And as always, don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app to see all of these guys as well as our other contributors with the NFL at Action Network to see their picks as well. Very good. Thanks to Luke and Brandon, Grant Nee for joining us this week. Brendan Glasheen, thanks for listening to NFL Week 10 Best Bets episode here on the Action Network podcast. We'll talk to you again next week.